The doctor's hand froze midair as the operating room door burst open. Standing there, in her neon blouse and furious glare, was Karen, the HOA president who'd tormented our family for months. "This surgery violates community safety codes," she shouted, waving papers like they meant something in a hospital. My daughter lay on the table, her heart monitor beeping faster, the anesthesiologist shouting for security. But Karen didn't stop. She yanked the oxygen line from the wall and screamed, "You people don't belong here." That's when Dr. Harris did something no one expected. He reached for the phone, eyes blazing, and said, "You just committed a felony." Within minutes, sirens screamed outside. The woman who tried to stop my daughter's life-saving operation was about to face her own reckoning. Hey, everyone, before we dive into this unbelievable story, I want to ask you something. Which city are you watching this from? Drop your city name down below in the comments, because I love seeing how far our stories travel across America, from Texas to New York, from Florida to California. Globe showing Americas, and if this is your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon bell, because the story you're about to hear will leave you angry, heartbroken, and completely speechless. Now, let's talk about what happened. It all began when my little girl, Emily, needed an urgent surgery, a life-saving operation that couldn't wait another day. The doctors had scheduled everything. My wife and I were terrified, but ready. We'd fought insurance battles, sleepless nights, and endless fear, but nothing could have prepared us for her. That day, the one person who had no business being near the hospital, HOA President Karen, showed up and tried to stop the surgery. She claimed it violated HOA community health standards. Yes, you heard that right, an HOA rule in a hospital. No one could believe the words coming out of her mouth. Nurses froze, patients stared, and my daughter's life hung in the balance while this woman argued about property compliance. But what happened next changed everything. Because the moment she crossed that line, literally, she walked straight into a trap of her own making. This isn't just a story about arrogance, it's a story about justice. Now let's start from the very moment it all began. The sun hadn't even risen properly when I felt the tremor in my daughter's small hand. Her name was Emily, and she was only 11, too young to carry the kind of fear that sat behind her soft eyes that morning. The hospital room was cold, the walls humming with quiet machinery. My wife, Sarah, sat beside her bed, whispering prayers under her breath. Emily's heart surgery had been delayed twice because of insurance and paperwork, but finally, this was the day that could save her life. The doctors had been kind, hopeful even. "She's strong," Dr. Harris told us the night before. "She'll pull through. Just trust the process." I wanted to trust it. I wanted to believe nothing could go wrong anymore. But deep down, I'd learned, especially in Willowbrook Estates, that peace never lasted long. Not when Karen Whitmore was around. Karen had been our HOA president for less than a year, and in that short time, she'd turned our quiet neighborhood into her personal kingdom. She fined people for parking too close to their mailboxes, sent warnings for kids playing basketball in driveways, even demanded residents repaint fences to match community standards. It was ridiculous, but no one dared stand up to her. Until us. A few months earlier, Karen had seen Emily's wheelchair ramp being built and accused us of unauthorized structural changes. She claimed it lowered property values and demanded it be removed, even though the HOA rules allowed accessibility modifications. We fought her legally and we won, but that victory left a deep bruise on her pride. Ever since, she'd been waiting, lurking for a chance to strike back. That morning, as I was packing Emily's blanket and her favorite stuffed bear for the hospital, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Some people should know their place. "Hope your precious operation goes well." Winking face, I froze. My heart skipped. The words felt cold, personal. I showed it to Sarah, whose face turned pale. "Do you think it's her?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We both knew exactly who it was. We arrived at St. Mary's Hospital around 6:45 a.m. The nurses smiled gently as they wheeled Emily in. She was brave, too brave for her age. "Daddy," she said, clutching my hand, When I wake up, will my heart stop hurting? I knelt beside her and forced a smile. When you wake up, sweetheart, you'll feel brand new. She nodded softly, eyes fluttering closed as they began prepping her for anesthesia. Meanwhile, outside, a storm was quietly forming. Karen had found out about the operation. How, we didn't know, but she had. Later, we learned she'd seen our GoFundMe post that mentioned the hospital and time of surgery. She'd even shown up earlier that morning, arguing with the hospital's front desk about unauthorized medical activity connected to HOA insurance violations. The receptionist thought she was joking until she started shouting, "Do you understand? That family doesn't have HOA clearance for this. They use community funds to modify their home illegally." Karen's shrill voice echoed across the lobby. "I demand to see the patient." The security guard tried to calm her, but she waved her phone wildly. "I have documents," she screamed, waving the HOA bylaws like they were court orders. By 9 a.m., as Emily was being wheeled into pre-op, Karen was still pacing the waiting area, furious that no one was taking her seriously. She called 2 board members, neither picked up. Then she called the police non-emergency line, insisting that illegal surgery was being performed on HOA property. When dispatch refused to log the report, she marched right through the authorized personnel-only doors. Inside the sterile corridors, alarms started to sound. I was standing outside the OR, signing final papers, when I heard her voice, that same screech that made the neighborhood tremble. "Stop this operation. This is against Community Medical Code Section 14B. Every head turned. Nurses gasped. A surgeon nearly dropped a tray of instruments. And there she was, Karen Whitmore, HOA badge pinned proudly to her chest, storming toward the operating room like she owned it. "Ma'am, you can't be here," a nurse shouted. But Karen ignored her. "That child's procedure isn't cleared. They violated multiple home safety rules during their renovations. The HOA must be informed before." Before she could finish, Dr. Harris stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" "I'm the HOA president of Willowbrook Estates," she snapped. "This is a hospital," he said coldly, "not your subdivision." Still, she pushed past him, and that's when everything changed. Karen reached for the oxygen hose near Emily's bed, pulling it halfway out. "This is illegal," she shouted again, her voice cracking with rage. "You people think rules don't apply to you." The monitor beeped rapidly. Emily stirred under the anesthesia, mask, her small fingers twitching. My wife screamed, "Stop, you're hurting her," and lunged forward, but I caught her arm. 2 nurses rushed to restrain Karen, but she kept shouting nonsense about community standards. Dr. Harris slammed his fist on the counter. "That's enough." His voice cut through the chaos like thunder. He pointed directly at her. "You just committed a criminal act. Step away now." For the first time, Karen froze. The realization hit her. The cameras, the witnesses, the horrified faces staring at her. But her arrogance was too deep-rooted. She straightened her blazer and hissed, "You'll regret this." The HOA. That's when he picked up the hospital phone. "Security, I need immediate police response in R3. We have an intruder interfering with a medical procedure." Minutes later, I heard the sound of heavy boots echoing down the hallway. Blue lights flickered against the glass. Officers rushed in, and one of them shouted, "Hands where we can see them." Karen tried to argue, claiming she had authority, but the officers weren't listening. They cuffed her right there, in front of everyone, her voice trembling now. "This is a misunderstanding. I was protecting community health." "No, ma'am," one officer said sternly, "you just endangered a child's life." They led her out, still shouting about bylaws and compliance, her face red with humiliation. I remember standing there, my whole body shaking, from anger, from fear, from disbelief. My daughter was alive, thank God, but I kept thinking, how far could one person's ego go before they lost their humanity completely? Dr. Harris turned to me, his eyes soft again. "She's stable. Let's get her to surgery now." And as they wheeled Emily through the double doors, I took one last look at the chaos Karen had left behind. The overturned chair, the papers scattered on the floor, and the echo of her madness fading down the hall. That was the morning everything changed, the morning when an HOA rule-obsessed woman crossed the line from arrogance into crime. But little did we know, that was only the beginning. Because once the story hit the news, Karen's downfall had only just begun. The moment Karen was dragged out of the hospital, everything went eerily silent, like the air itself was trying to process what had just happened. Nurses stared at one another, still trembling. Dr. Harris stood there, phone pressed against his ear, confirming that the operating room was secure. My wife, Sarah, broke down in tears, clutching Emily's blanket like it was her lifeline. Meanwhile, I stood frozen, my mind racing. The words child endangerment, trespassing, and assault echoed faintly as the officers walked Karen through the main hallway. Her voice still shrill, still trying to justify the unthinkable. But something in that moment shifted. The witnesses, the nurses, the security guards, everyone had recorded what she'd done. And within hours, the world would see it too. When Emily's surgery finally began, the hospital placed us in a quiet waiting area. Sarah's hands shook as she held mine, whispering prayers again and again. I could still see the oxygen hose swinging in my head, the way Karen's hand had ripped it loose like some villain out of a nightmare. I tried to focus on Emily. I tried to believe she'd be okay. But every few seconds, my phone buzzed, notifications piling up from neighbors, texts from people in Willowbrook Estates. Is it true Karen got arrested? Bro, is this about your daughter's surgery? Dude, she's trending on Facebook. Someone recorded the whole thing. I opened one of the links, and there it was. A 42-second clip filmed by a nurse, shaky, but clear enough to show Karen screaming, waving her papers, and pulling the oxygen line. The caption read, HOA president tries TO stop child surgery arrested on site. Within minutes, the video had thousands of views. By the time Emily's surgery was halfway done, it had reached millions. The next morning, when I stepped out to grab coffee, there were already reporters outside the hospital. Microphones, cameras, vans, it felt like something out of a movie. Sir, are you the father? One journalist shouted. Can you tell us what really happened? Another asked. Was it true? She claimed HOA authority inside a hospital? I didn't want fame. I didn't want cameras. I just wanted my daughter safe. But watching Karen's face plastered all over the internet, that arrogant expression turned into something desperate, felt like justice finally breathing. One clip, uploaded by a nurse named Megan, had hit 5 million views overnight. The comments section exploded with outrage. She tried to stop a child surgery? What's wrong with her? This is the most Karen thing I've ever seen. Lock her up and throw away the HOA manual. But not everyone found it funny. Many people recognized the hospital, and some even identified Karen's neighborhood. Soon, news channels picked up the story. CNN ran a segment titled HOA President Arrested for Interfering in Child's Operation. And just like that, our private tragedy became a national headline. While Emily recovered in the ICU, I received a call from Officer Daniels, the one who had arrested Karen. Mr. Thompson, I just wanted to update you. Mrs. Whitmore's in custody. She's been charged with interference with medical treatment, trespassing, and reckless endangerment. I took a deep breath. Is she still denying it? He chuckled dryly. Oh, she's doing more than that. She's saying she was protecting the community. She even asked for her HOA lawyer. I couldn't help but laugh, bitterly. She's really gone insane. Yeah, he sighed, but don't worry. Everything she did was caught on camera, the hospital's surveillance, multiple witnesses, and that viral video. The DA's office already called. They're filing charges. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. For the first time in months, I knew we weren't powerless anymore. By the time Emily woke up, weak but smiling, the world had already turned Karen into the most hated woman in America. A TikTok hashtag HOA Karen, had millions of views. Late-night hosts joked about it. News anchors debated how someone could take community power so far. Even our HOA board had called an emergency meeting to suspend her presidency. But what none of them knew was that Karen wasn't done. From jail, she began calling board members, claiming she was set up. She told one of them that I'd planted evidence and fabricated the footage. She even accused Dr. Harris of violating medical ethics for involving police. Her arrogance refused to die. That's when I decided enough was enough. A week later, I stood outside the HOA office with a folder in hand. Inside were printed screenshots, videos, witness statements, and a letter from the hospital confirming the extent of her interference. The new interim president, George Patel, met me at the door. "Mr. Thompson," he said, shaking my hand awkwardly, "I want you to know, the board is horrified by what happened. We're suspending Karen permanently. She's already facing felony charges. You and your family don't owe the HOA a single cent of those fines she imposed." I nodded, still holding the folder. "Good, because I'm pressing charges myself. My daughter almost died because of her ego." He swallowed hard. "I understand." Before I left, I turned to him and said, "Tell your members HOA rules were meant to protect communities, not destroy families." Back at the hospital, Emily's recovery was slow but steady. Her smile was weak but warm. She held my hand and whispered, "Daddy, am I safe now?" I brushed her hair gently and said, "Yes, sweetheart, you're safe now. The bad lady can't hurt anyone anymore." Sarah looked at me from the chair beside her, tears glistening in her eyes. "Do you think she'll actually go to jail?" I nodded. She deserves to. But I don't think the punishment she's facing now is just the courts. It's the whole world watching who she really is. And I was right. 2 days later, the local paper ran a photo of Karen leaving court, handcuffed, pale, and hiding her face from the flashing cameras. The headline read, "HOA president faces public backlash after hospital incident. Neighbors call for permanent removal." That image went viral too. Neighbors who once feared her started knocking on our door, apologizing for staying silent all those months. One elderly lady even said, "You stood up when none of us could. Thank you for protecting that little girl." I smiled, but deep inside, I knew this wasn't just about us anymore. Karen had become a symbol of how power, when abused, collapses under its own arrogance. Still, there was one thing left unresolved. Because the more famous the story became, the more secrets started to surface about what Karen had done before. Things no one in Willowbrook had ever dared to talk about. And those secrets? They were darker than anyone imagined. 2 days after Emily's successful surgery, I finally stepped outside the hospital for the first time in a week. The crisp autumn air hit my face, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, things were finally getting back to normal. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Because that was the day I learned Karen's story wasn't over. It was only peeling open. When I returned home, my neighbor, Linda, was waiting on my porch with a trembling hand clutching a USB drive. "You need to see this," she said, looking over her shoulder nervously. "Before the board destroys it." I frowned. "What is it?" "Karen's HOA files," she whispered. "Every letter, every photo, every private report she kept on all of us. She made copies of everything, even your family." My stomach dropped. That evening, after putting Emily to sleep, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Folders filled the screen, labeled with names of residents. Some I knew, some I didn't. Each file was packed with personal data. Photos of homes, vehicles, invoices, even private notes about people's habits. But what stopped my heart cold was one file titled Thompson_family_violations. I clicked it. Inside were photos of our house, zoomed-in shots of Emily's wheelchair ramp, our security cameras, even pictures taken through our windows. There were emails, too, ones I'd never seen before, to HOA board members from Karen Whitmore. "This family continues to disobey community protocols. Their daughter's medical equipment outside violates aesthetics. I'll find a way to get them removed. No one defies the HOA under my watch." Removed? She didn't mean a fine. She meant us. I sat there frozen as the realization hit me. Karen hadn't just been enforcing rules. She had been stalking us, monitoring every move we made, Then came the real shocker, a hidden folder at the bottom named Insurance Confidential. Inside were PDF attachments of private medical and financial documents from multiple residents, things only accessible through the HOA portal. How did she get them? And then one more file, hospital visit plan. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was an entire document detailing how she'd planned to inspect the hospital facility during Emily's operation to ensure no community health violations were occurring. She had planned that intrusion days in advance. The next morning, I called Officer Daniels. "I found something," I said, voice shaking. "You need to see this." An hour later, two detectives arrived. They examined the files silently, exchanging grim looks. "This isn't just HOA harassment," Daniels said finally. "This is invasion of privacy, stalking, illegal data collection, maybe even blackmail." "Blackmail?" I asked. He nodded. "We've seen cases like this before. She may have used residents' private info to keep control, fear, leverage, intimidation." He paused, then added, "If this is all true, she's going away for a long time." News of the discovery spread like wildfire. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, releasing a public statement saying, "We are shocked and appalled by the unauthorized actions of our former president." But by then, the damage was done. Reporters started calling the incident the Willowbrook Files scandal. Neighbors who once bowed to Karen's orders began coming forward with their own stories. Linda admitted Karen had fined her $200 for unapproved flowers. Another neighbor revealed Karen threatened to report him for having his disabled brother visit too often. Someone else confessed Karen had demanded copies of medical prescriptions during a neighborhood health audit. She wasn't just enforcing HOA power, she was abusing it in the most twisted way imaginable. While the investigation deepened, Emily's story became the emotional center of it all. The local news interviewed Sarah and me. "We didn't exaggerate, we just told the truth. Our daughter almost died because someone believed her pride was more important than a child's life," Sarah said on live TV, holding Emily's hand. "No one should have that kind of power in any neighborhood." The clip went viral overnight, 15 million views. People across America began demanding HOA reform. Lawmakers tweeted support. One congresswoman even said, "This case shows how oversight must exist in all community boards." Karen's face became a meme, captions reading, "When you think HOA rules apply to hospitals." But behind the humor, something darker was brewing. One evening, as I was locking up the house, a car slowed down outside. Its headlights lingered too long on our front yard before driving away. My gut tightened. The next morning, I found a note on our mailbox. "You should have stayed quiet. Some of us still believe in the HOA." My hands went cold. I immediately called the police. They took the note, ran prints, but couldn't trace it. Turns out, Karen wasn't working alone. The detectives later found that two board members, her close friends, Jeffrey and Marianne, had access to the same hidden files. They'd been feeding her personal info and approving her illegal fines for years. When confronted, Marianne broke down crying. She confessed that Karen kept them silent through blackmail, threatening to release private financial details if they ever spoke out. The entire HOA crumbled overnight. Then came the court hearing. Karen stood before the judge, no longer in her bright blazer or heels, but in a beige jumpsuit, her arrogance replaced by a cold, hollow stare. The prosecutor listed the charges one by one: trespassing, reckless endangerment, stalking, data theft, and criminal harassment. When my turn came to speak, I looked straight at her and said, "You tried to take control of everything, even my daughter's life. But the one thing you'll never control again is anyone's fear." The courtroom fell silent. For the first time, Karen looked small, a shadow of the tyrant who once ruled our streets. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and a restraining order against every family in Willowbrook. That night, after we came home, I sat beside Emily's bed. She was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. The machines were gone, replaced by a soft hum of normal life. I looked out the window. the same street that once felt like a prison under Karen's reign, now quiet, almost healing. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't just a victory for us. It was a warning to every neighborhood where power hides behind rules and arrogance wears the mask of authority. Because in the end, the monster wasn't in the laws. It was in the person who thought she was above them. The courthouse that morning was packed tighter than a Friday night movie theater. Reporters lined the steps, flashing cameras as soon as anyone in a suit appeared. The air buzzed with tension. People wanted to see the woman who had tried to stop a child surgery, the infamous HOA Karen of Willowbrook. Inside, the courtroom lights glared against the polished wood. The judge, Honorable Miriam Cole, was known for her no-nonsense attitude. She looked like someone who could silence a room with a single glance, and that's exactly what she did when Karen was escorted in. Karen's once perfect hair was tied back loosely, her confident smirk on. She avoided everyone's eyes, but even in handcuffs, she tried to look composed, like she still believed she was the victim. When the bailiff called her name, she stood stiffly. Karen Whitmore, charged with criminal trespass, endangerment of a minor, obstruction of medical care, and data theft. Sarah gripped my arm tightly. I could feel her heart pounding through her palm. The prosecution began by playing the hospital footage, the clip that had set the internet ablaze. The courtroom watched in silence as the video showed Karen storming into the operating room, shouting about community standards. The moment she ripped the oxygen line, gasps echoed through the gallery. Someone muttered, "Monster." Karen flinched, but kept her chin high. Then came the nurse's phone video, shaky but damning. The camera caught every word, every flash of her madness, ending with police leading her out in cuffs. The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this was not a misunderstanding. This was premeditated interference in a life-or-death medical procedure." Then he pointed at Karen. She believed her neighborhood authority extended beyond property lines, into people's lives, into a child's hospital bed. The gallery murmured in outrage. Next came the testimony that changed everything, Dr. Harris. He stepped up to the stand in his white coat, calm but visibly angry. "I've performed over 600 surgeries in my career," he said firmly, "but I've never experienced anything like that day. Mrs. Whitmore's intrusion could have killed my patient." He described in chilling detail how Emily's vitals spiked when the oxygen line was pulled. "If we hadn't acted immediately," he said, his voice breaking for the first time, "we might have lost her." Then the prosecutor asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Doctor, was there any legitimate reason for Mrs. Whitmore to be in that operating room?" "None," he said. "Her actions were not only reckless, they were malicious. She endangered a child's life for the sake of control." When he stepped down, people in the gallery clapped before the judge banged her gavel to restore order. Karen stared at him with wide, trembling eyes. For once, she didn't have an answer. But the defense tried a desperate move. Karen's lawyer stood and said, "Your Honor, my client suffers from obsessive regulatory delusion, a psychological condition causing her to fixate on order and rules beyond reason. She believed she was protecting the community." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge raised a brow. "Are you suggesting this was a mental health episode?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer replied. "Mrs. Whitmore's intentions, while misguided, were not criminal. They stemmed from a psychological compulsion, not malice." The prosecutor immediately objected. "Compulsion doesn't excuse criminal behavior. She trespassed, endangered a life, and illegally collected private data. This wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a pattern." He slammed a file onto the table. Exhibit 12, the Willowbrook files. As the evidence displayed on the large courtroom screen, the air turned heavy. Emails, surveillance photos, secret reports. The list of violations was endless. And then came the final nail, a recorded voicemail Karen had left for her board member, Jeffrey. "That family will learn who's in charge here. I don't care if it's a hospital or a courthouse. No one defies me." The audio echoed through the room like poison. The judge's expression hardened. Karen's face turned pale. Her lips quivered. And for the first time since the trial began, she broke. She shouted. It was all taken out of context. They defied the HOA. They mocked me. The judge slammed the gavel. Mrs. Whitmore, sit down. But Karen kept yelling, tears streaming down her face. I built that community. I made it safe. I kept it perfect. And they ruined everything. Her lawyer tried to calm her, but she shoved his hand away. You don't understand. I was protecting them. The courtroom exploded in murmurs again, reporters scribbling furiously, cameras clicking. The judge's voice cut through the noise. Order, or I'll clear the gallery. When the chaos settled, Karen was breathing heavily, shaking, her mascara running. Whatever illusion of control she had left was gone. Then came Sarah's turn. She walked up to the stand, holding a photo of Emily before her surgery, smiling, alive, full of light. Her voice trembled, but never broke. My daughter didn't need another enemy. She needed compassion. But this woman, she pointed at Karen, decided her pride was more important than my child's life. She paused, taking a deep breath. That day, when Karen pulled that hose, I saw something in her eyes I'll never forget. Not guilt, not fear, just power. Like hurting us made her feel justified. A tear slid down her cheek. My daughter still wakes up crying from nightmares. She asks me if the bad lady will come back. What do I tell her? The courtroom was silent. Even the judge's eyes softened. Sarah placed the photo on the evidence table and whispered, "Justice doesn't erase pain, but maybe it can stop someone like her from ever doing this again." By the time both sides rested their case, the tension was unbearable. Reporters outside were already calling it the trial that broke the HOA. The judge leaned forward, her voice steady but sharp. I've seen arrogance. I've seen abuse of power. But this was cruelty masked as order. Mrs. Whitmore, you weren't protecting your community. You were terrorizing it. She looked over her glasses. You used authority as a weapon, and you almost killed a child. Then she delivered the words we'd been waiting months to hear. This court finds the defendant, Karen Whitmore, guilty on all charges. A wave of emotion crashed through the room. Sarah gripped my arm, crying. Dr. Harris nodded solemnly. But Karen, she just stood there, shaking her head slowly, whispering, No, this isn't fair. I am the HOA. The bailiff took her by the arm. As she was led away, her eyes darted toward us, full of rage, disbelief, and something else, fear. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. But all I could hear was Sarah's quiet sob of relief. Emily, watching from a live stream in her hospital bed, had sent me a text that simply said, Daddy, the bad lady's gone. Red heart, I smiled through tears. Yes, sweetheart, I whispered. She's gone. But as we walked away from the courthouse, a thought lingered in my mind. This wasn't just the end of Karen's reign. It was the start of something bigger. Because when the dust settled and the world saw what had happened in Willowbrook, people everywhere began questioning what power really meant and who should ever be allowed to have it. The morning after Karen's conviction, Willowbrook estates looked different, quieter, lighter, almost as if the whole neighborhood had exhaled for the first time in years. The yellow violation notice papers that used to decorate mailboxes were gone. The HOA office, once buzzing with arrogance and authority, stood empty, its blinds drawn, its logo peeled from a glass. But what came next wasn't just silence. It was reckoning. The story had gone far beyond our little community now. National headlines read, HOA president imprisoned for hospital intrusion, community power abused. From rules to ruin. How a neighborhood dictator lost it all. Talk shows debated it. News anchors dissected it. Some called it the end of blind HOA power. Others called it a wake-up call for America. And as for me, well, I wasn't just watching from the sidelines anymore. I had work to do. For months, I'd lived under Karen's control, watching her destroy families, humiliate neighbors, and twist laws to feed her ego. Now that the truth was out, I was determined to make sure no one like her ever got that kind of power again. It started with a petition, the Willowbrook Reform Act. I spent nights drafting it on my laptop while Emily slept beside me. It demanded transparency from all HOA boards, no secret meetings, no unauthorized surveillance, and zero power to interfere with residents' private lives. Within a week, the petition hit 50,000 signatures, then 100,000, then 500,000. News stations started calling me the father who fought back. I didn't want fame, I wanted justice. Meanwhile, in Willowbrook, the truth about Karen's corruption continued unraveling. Investigators uncovered years of misuse of HOA funds. Money meant for landscaping and maintenance had been rerouted to administrative expenses that funded her personal lifestyle, luxury handbags, catered meetings, and even spa days labeled as community wellness checks. Residents were furious. The HOA members who had once followed her blindly now turned on one another, trying to dodge blame. One man, Jeffrey Lang, the treasurer, confessed to forging signatures on Karen's orders. Another, Marion Holt, admitted she'd approved Karen's medical inspection out of fear. The entire board resigned within days. For the first time in years, the HOA building became a community center again, not a throne for power, but a place where neighbors met, laughed, and shared food without fear of being fined for it. But even as justice spread, revenge still simmered inside me. I wanted to see her, not the caricature the world saw on TV, but the woman who almost took my child's life. So, when the police offered me the chance to attend her sentencing review hearing, I said yes. It was quiet that day. No cameras, no reporters. Just four walls, a few lawyers, and the woman who once ruled Willowbrook like a queen. Karen looked older, thinner. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. When she saw me, she didn't glare or smirk. She just stared, like she couldn't recognize me, or maybe couldn't recognize herself. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood, my palms sweating, my voice steady. You thought power made you untouchable. You thought rules gave you the right to play God. But power without empathy isn't leadership, it's cruelty. Karen's lip trembled. I leaned forward slightly. You tried to stop my daughter's surgery. You tried to stop her heartbeat. But she's alive. She laughs again. She plays again. And you? You'll spend years replaying that moment when your obsession met its consequence. The courtroom was silent. Even her lawyer didn't move. Karen's eyes welled up, and for the first time she whispered, barely audible, I just wanted control. I nodded. And that's exactly what you lost. Then I walked out. When I got home that evening, Emily was sitting by the window, sketching with her crayons. She looked up and smiled. Daddy, are the rules lady people gone now? She asked innocently. I knelt beside her. Yes, sweetheart. They're gone for good. She nodded and held up her drawing, a picture of our house with hearts above it. Good. Then we can have peace. I hugged her tightly, feeling that small, fragile heartbeat against my chest, the same one that woman almost silenced. Over the following months, life slowly returned to normal, but in a new way. Neighbors began holding community picnics again. The playground, once empty because of Karen's noise restrictions, was alive with laughter. We painted a mural near the HOA office, a simple quote beneath Emily's drawing, rules don't build communities, people do. The image went viral again, but this time not out of outrage, out of hope. Dr. Harris visited one weekend, smiling proudly at Emily's recovery. You know, he said, sometimes justice doesn't happen in the courtroom. It happens right here. He tapped his chest, when you can finally breathe again. He was right, but there was one final twist, one I never saw coming. A few weeks later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside, a single page written in careful handwriting. I've been thinking about what you said. You were right. Power made me blind. I don't expect forgiveness. But I do hope your daughter lives the long, beautiful life she deserves. Karen Whitmore. I sat there for a long time, reading the words again and again. Sarah saw the letter and asked softly, Are you going to reply? I shook my head. No. Some stories end better without an answer. I folded it gently and placed it in Emily's memory box, not as a reminder of fear, but of survival. The months turned into a year. Emily's checkups went perfectly. Her laughter filled every corner of the house again. And one quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind Willowbrook's rooftops, I looked around and realized the nightmare was over. The HOA still existed, but now it was different. Transparent. Accountable. Real neighbors helping real people. Sometimes I catch new residents staring at that mural near the community hall, the one with Emily's heart and those words beneath it. They always smile. Some even cry. And I think maybe that's what all this pain was for, to teach people that control without compassion destroys, but kindness it rebuilds. Because in the end, Karen lost everything she built from fear, and our daughter, the one she tried to silence, became the symbol of everything she could never understand. A full year passed since that nightmare began, a year of healing, rebuilding, and rediscovering what peace truly felt like. Willowbrook Estates had changed beyond recognition. The manicured lawns and white fences were still there, but the fear was gone. The laughter that once died at Karen's footsteps had returned, carried by the breeze through the open windows and children's games echoing down the street. For the first time in a long time, our community felt alive. One Saturday morning, the new HOA president, George Patel, invited everyone to the park for a memorial gathering, not for Karen, but for the victims of her control. It wasn't a bitter event, it was something deeper, a reminder that justice wasn't just about punishment, but growth. As I stood under the tall oak tree with Sarah and Emily beside me, I could feel every I turned toward us. George took the microphone and began. 1 year ago, our neighborhood was trapped in fear. Rules became weapons. But one family's courage brought us all back to humanity. Today, we honor that courage and the life of a little girl who reminded us what matters most. The crowd applauded. Emily smiled shyly, clutching her mother's hand. Then George motioned me to come forward. I stepped up to the mic, heart pounding, looking over the crowd. I saw faces that used to look away when Karen walked by, faces that now stood tall, unafraid. I cleared my throat. A year ago, I thought justice meant revenge. I thought it meant seeing the person who hurt my family suffer. But standing here today, I realized something. Real justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. I paused, taking a deep breath. Karen destroyed peace because she couldn't find it inside herself. But what she didn't realize was that no rule, no fine, no title can give you control over people's hearts. Power without empathy isn't power, it's poison. The wind rustled through the trees as I continued. We could have moved away. We almost did. But we stayed, because this community isn't hers, it's ours. And we rebuilt it not with anger but with unity. The crowd fell silent, the kind of silence that holds weight, the kind that changes people. Later that afternoon, Emily released a white balloon into the sky. Written on it in purple marker were the words, "For every kid who is scared, may you always feel safe again." It floated higher and higher until it disappeared into the clouds. Sarah whispered, "She's stronger than any of us." I nodded. She had to be. That moment marked the true end of it all, not the court sentence, not the media frenzy, but that balloon vanishing into the sky, carrying the last pieces of anger away with it. Weeks later, I visited the old courthouse to drop off some documents for the HOA reform program. On my way out, I passed by the county jail annex, and through the fence, I caught a glimpse of someone in beige scrubs tending to a small garden. It was Karen. Her posture was different now, smaller, humbler. She was kneeling by a patch of wildflowers, planting new seedlings into the soil. She didn't notice me, and I didn't call out. But for a brief moment, our eyes met across the fence. No words were exchanged. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a silent understanding that what was broken had finally begun to heal in both of us, in our own ways. I turned away, leaving her to her garden. Maybe that was redemption, not forgiveness, but the quiet acceptance that life keeps moving forward. Months turned into another year. Emily's health bloomed like the wildflowers Karen planted. She was running now, not just walking, her heart strong, her spirit unstoppable. One evening, while sitting on the porch, she asked me, "Daddy, what does justice mean?" I smiled. Justice means the truth catches up, no matter how long it takes. She tilted her head. Even to people who do bad things? Yes, I said softly, especially to them. Because justice doesn't hate, Emily. It teaches. She thought about that for a moment, then whispered, "Then I hope Miss Karen learns fast." I couldn't help but chuckle. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. A few months later, I received an invitation in the mail, not from Karen, but from the State Housing Council. They wanted me to speak at a public reform summit about community power and accountability. I accepted. Standing on that stage months later, looking out at officials, lawyers, and HOA board members from across the country, I told them the story, our story, about a woman who lost herself to power, about a family who refused to bow, and about a neighborhood that learned the difference between order and oppression. When I finished, the entire room rose to its feet, not for me, but for what the story represented: hope after harm. Afterward, a young man approached me. "My mother's in an HOA battle too," he said quietly. She thought no one cared. But your story, it gave her courage. I shook his hand. Tell her she's not alone. None of us are. He smiled, eyes glistening. You turned your pain into something powerful. As he walked away, I realized something profound. Maybe that was the real justice I'd been chasing all along. Not punishment, not revenge, but purpose. That night, back home in Willowbrook, I tucked Emily into bed. She was sleepy, her hair fanning across the pillow like sunlight. She whispered, "Daddy, do bad people ever change?" I thought of Karen's letter, of her tending that garden behind the fence. "Sometimes," I said, "when they finally see what their power cost them." She smiled softly. "Then maybe she'll plant flowers for me one day." My throat tightened. Maybe she already has. As I kissed her forehead, I looked out the window at the calm, moonlit neighborhood that had once been a battlefield, and realized that redemption doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it grows quietly like wildflowers from ruined soil. If you believe that no one should ever use power to hurt others, share this story. Let it remind the world that rules mean nothing without humanity, and that courage can bloom even in the darkest corners of fear. Speech Balloon, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone tried to stop your child's surgery? And if you believe justice still exists, hit that subscribe button and keep spreading stories that restore faith in compassion. Because every voice that stands against cruelty becomes a light that guides others home. Glowing Star,